Welcome to this educational video about how to write an energy systems interplay extended response. So this comes under energy system, which is in the unit 3 of physical education and area of study 2. The learning intention. So by the end of this video, you'll understand how energy systems work together and we'll be able to write an energy systems interplay extended response question. Alright, so during last video, we covered the 3 energy systems, when they work and how they work together to provide energy to move. During physical activity, all 3 systems contribute to the resynthesis of ATP, and it's important that we learn how the 3 energy systems work together to provide the ATP throughout physical activity. So just an overview of this video. So there's a very high chance that an energy systems interplay question will be asked on either your SAC, so your school assessed coursework, or your exam at the end of the year, or even both. Generally, these are a 10 marker extended response question, so it's obviously a fair chunk of your mark. Therefore, it's really important that we get familiar with how to write these and how to write them well so we can get as many marks as possible. And it's really important to have a sound understanding of a variety of different sports, but even more important that we understand the 3 energy systems. And we have to break down the response systematically. So rather than just writing one big chunk of words, we want to break it down into different paragraphs. And I'm going to show you how to do that soon. All right, so how to write an energy systems interplay response. So first of all, you have to brainstorm what you know about the sport that's being asked. And then you have to break the response into 4 sections. The first section is going to be an opening comment. Nice and easy. You can just memorize this comment. The second will be a paragraph about the ATP-PC system and how it relates to that sport, whatever the question may be. Third paragraph, the anaerobic glycolysis system. The fourth, the aerobic system. And it's important during the last 3 paragraphs, so the ATP, PC system, anaerobic glycolysis, and the aerobic system, we're talking about when they're used during the sport or race or activity, why they're used, like why is that going to be the dominant, why is the ATP, PC system going to be the dominant energy system, as well as examples. So we do that for all 3 paragraphs. All right, first of all, the opening statement. So all 3 energy systems will be contributing to the effort at the start of the game, race, or activity. So obviously it depends what your question is. It might be a 100-meter race. It might be a football game. So it obviously depends on the question, but you can pretty much cut and paste this opening statement, memorize it, and write something like this or something similar to this at the start of your response. As you can see in the picture here, at the start of all 3 are contributing. So the ATP-PC system, which is in the green in this photo, is obviously dominant at the start, but the anaerobic glycolysis system is still contributing, and even though it's not much, but the aerobic energy system is still contributing also. So all 3 energy systems will be contributing. First major paragraph will be on the ATP-PC system. So we remember this will be at maximal intensity. So we talk about why it is going to be used, because it's at a high intensity above 85% max heart rate. Short duration, so only lasts about 0 to 10 seconds until it depletes. So it's often at the start of play or of the race. So if you think of a 100-meter race, it's going to be dominant at the start, or at the start of play in, let's say, a football match, when the ruckman jumps up or the full forward sprints up at the ball. Some examples. So start of a sprint, as I said, lifting a weight, maximal activity. So something like long jump, shot put, where we want to jump the furthest or the highest, or throw the furthest or the highest, or after a rest. So for example, having a shot for goal in AFL, you've marked the ball, you go back, you have a bit of a rest, and you try to kick the ball nice and far to get a goal. Just some examples of when the ATP PC system will be used. Anaerobic glycolysis system. So again, it's still a pretty high to moderate intensity. Short duration, so it depletes after about 90 seconds, but also around 45 seconds, it's peak power. Becomes dominant once the ATP PC system has depleted. So for example, at the 15-second mark of a 400-meter race, so the ATP PC system has depleted, so then the anaerobic glycolysis system becomes dominant. Repeated leads, whether it be hockey or netball or football, any real team sport, you keep leading. So you're doing that high intensity bursts of running, but because you're not resting in between these leads, because you keep presenting to the ball, you no longer use the ATP PC system because it's depleted, then your anaerobic glycolysis system becomes dominant. Same with circuit training. So something like in F45, you only get a little bit of rest, so your ATP PC system doesn't have time to fully replenish, so you don't get to use too much of that, therefore your anaerobic glycolysis system might be dominant. And last paragraph is the aerobic system. So we know this has a slow release of energy. It's usually lower intensities. Also requires oxygen. Long duration. So as we know, it starts at the start of activity, and we use the aerobic system contributes to ATP until you stop, till the end of exercise. So it's pretty much dominant in any continuous exercise over 90 seconds. So for example, any long distance race, whether it be a marathon, super marathon, 3-kilometer race, Ironman. But also if you're trying to think of some team sports, maybe the rover in football, or a midfielder or a centre in netball, when they're always around the ball, they're not often resting, like a full forward might rest when the ball's not near them in football. But a rover is always around the ball. They're always running, so they don't get all that much time to rest. All right, so we're just going to go through a work example. So I'm going to give you a question here. Feel free to pause the video and try to attempt your own response, and we're going to go through the answer soon. So the question, describe the energy interplay of a centre in a game of netball. So this will generally be a 10 marker. So feel free to pause the video now, and the next slide we're going to go through the answer. All right, here's the answers. This is really good response that I'm using now. So your initial statement. So all 3 energy systems will be contributing to the effort at the start of the game. Done, tick. You can memorize that. Then our first major paragraph is about the ATP PC system. So the ATP PC system will be the major contributor for any high intensity, so 95% plus max heart rate or above. Short duration efforts of under 10 seconds when there has been enough recovery time between bouts to replenish CP, or creatine phosphate stores. For example, so it's important that we always use an example to link back to what we're talking about and link it back to the sport. So here, for example, the centre player passes the ball to the wing attack on the centre, pass, and sprints to the top of the circle for the next pass. So they've linked it back to the sport. So talking about sprinting, so high intensity. The ATP PC system is used during these efforts because energy is required quickly to meet the demands of the efforts, and the ATP-CP system supplies and synthesizes ATP at the fastest rate. So an explanation of why the ATP-PC system is dominant during this activity of sprinting. Next paragraph, the anaerobic glycolysis system will be the dominant provider of ATP for the center player in any longer duration, longer than 10 seconds, but you're still at a high intensity, so 85% max heart rate, for example, and above efforts, and for any repeated high intensity efforts where there hasn't been enough time for the CP to replenish. So for example, always link it back to the sport. From a baseline throw in the center, player makes repeated leads down the court. So back and forth, back and forth. The anaerobic glycolysis system is the dominant provider in these situations because it is the next fastest energy system at providing ATP resynthesis, and the aerobic energy system is not able to supply enough oxygen to meet these demands. So you're talking about the high intensity, and there's not enough time or rest in between these leads or sprints. Therefore, the ATP-PC system can't be used. So that is why the anaerobic glycolysis system is dominant. Last paragraph, the aerobic system will be mainly dominant for any low intensity efforts of below 85% max heart rate and during breaks and recovery. For example, the center playing is either walking or jogging to take a sideline throw in, and as well as quarter time, half time, 3/4 time breaks. So that's linking it back to the sport of netball. So talking about low heart rate, just walking to the sideline to take a throw, or even just at half time where they're eating oranges, for example, their aerobic system will be dominant. So always linking it back to the sport. The aerobic system is dominant at these times because it is able to supply enough oxygen to meet the demands of the low intensity efforts. It provides the greatest amount or yield of ATP with no fatiguing byproducts. So during the times that the aerobic energy system is dominant, the CP stores will be replenishing and lactic acid will be removed and metabolized. So that's pretty much all from us. Just our final tip: to write a good extended response interplay question, you must have a strong understanding of the 3 energy systems and when they would be used. Make sure you always give relevant sporting examples. So it's all good to just memorize one response, but you have to make it relevant to what the questions are answering. So in this case, we're talking about netball. And practice on a variety of sports. It's all well and good you memorizing netball, for example, but you could be asked on anything. Could be football, could be lawn bowls, could be American gridiron. So you have to understand and adapt to whatever the question is asking. So good luck with your studies, and remember to stay fit and exercise. All the best.